Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. I want to start off by taking a look at the front half of the month of August, and we're looking first here at total precipitation ranks by climate district. So far this month, it has been extremely wet in both North and South Carolina, with North Carolina right now having a top 10 wettest start to the month. Meanwhile, take a look way far to the west, over the Four Corner states. See all those 128s? Those represent the driest start to the month of August that we have on record. Now, thinking about temperatures, well, this is what the climate district average temperature ranks map looks like, again, for August 1st through the 17th. We have been warm across most of North Carolina on average to start the month, despite the fact that things have cooled down recently given the huge ridge that is in place over the southwestern United States. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. This is the flow of the atmosphere midday today, and there is a large ridge parked over the southwest, and the flow is going around it just like this. Even though there are low pressure centers that are coming out of the North Pacific, they're going to have to ride over the top of this ridge, which is acting like a pretty powerful block in the flow of the atmosphere. Downstream of it, we have troughs, and part of the consequence of having a trough like that sitting up downstream of that big ridge is increased chances for showers and storms yet again this week across the Carolinas. But it also means that the atmosphere is not set up in a pattern that's going to keep us very hot in the Carolinas. All that heat is west, and I'm talking very hot temperatures. Take a look at this. In Death Valley, at Furnace Creek, they measured a temperature yesterday on Sunday of 128 degrees Fahrenheit. It reached right there a peak in the middle of the afternoon. Now, the thinking is that at the Furnace Creek Observation Station, where the temperature got to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, that if that temperature verifies, that would be the hottest August temperature that we've measured anywhere on Earth, going back to 1913. Hottest August temperature. There was no relief from this heat either. The humidity levels were 7%, so if that doesn't define for you what dry heat is, I don't know what does. And a wind of just 2 miles an hour out of the northwest. So I thought you'd get a kick out of seeing some of that today. Speaking of activity over the weekend that was interesting, take a look at this map that shows lightning strikes over the weekend. Now, we were quite stormy across for part of the weekend across North Carolina, but we also had storms right in the periphery of that ridge, not only in the Central Plains, but also into California as well. And staying in California for a minute, I would like to at least show you some of the crazy videos that emerged from some of the fires that were up near the border between California and Nevada near Reno. Over there on the left, one of the pyrocumulus clouds, what they are, they're these large, deep plumes of smoke that oftentimes build big storms on top of them. One of the pyrocumulus clouds here produced a really dramatic circulation, a tornadic type vortex that was rotating, rotating in a clockwise direction. And the National Weather Service out of Reno posted the picture that's over there on the right, showing you these large fiery vortexes that were underneath these storms. You can see the flow. If I just show you Sunday here, this is Sunday kind of midday till sundown. I'm running it back and forth to kind of get an idea of what we're looking at here. You see, this will be the pattern we're going to continue to see throughout much of the next week. And the concern for the Carolinas is we're going to be getting kind of the sandwiching of fronts right along North and South Carolina, which means high chances of storms throughout much of not only the next 7 days, but the next couple of weeks here. Some of those big storms in the middle part of the United States, yeah, they produce big hail and also some very strong straight line winds. And so it was a pretty nasty go of it in the midsection of the country over the weekend. Now, bigger picture first. I said I really wanted to talk about the tropics. Well, this is where that begins. We're going to start first with the MJO. What's going on right now is that from May 31st through almost the end of July, the Mad-Julian Oscillation was over here in phase 1-2. It then moved for the beginning of July out into phase 3, 4, 5, 6, and is now currently sitting right here on the edge of 7, 8, and null space, okay? It is forecast to go right back to where it was, phase 1 and 2. Now, what does all of that mean? Well, those phases are actually listed out down here. See the numbers 1 through 8 down there at the bottom? That just tells you where the biggest thunderstorms are, the most convection. And here's the issue with the flow pattern in the tropics, and this is critical for North Carolina, okay? We will be seeing over the next week, see these cooler colors and the warmer colors that are over here? We will be seeing over the next 2 weeks the trade winds strengthen across the Indian Ocean with westerly winds here across the Pacific. Now, what that does is over phase 5, 6, and 7, right here in the middle, you get divergence. They are spreading apart. And because this is happening at the low levels of the atmosphere, we're going to get sinking motion. I'll put an X right in this area. Now, why I'm telling you all of that is that area is right here. So we're going to have stronger trade winds this way and that way. And with all of that sinking motion, it's going to clear out the skies, and it's going to start to warm up this side of our little burgeoning La Nina here. It's really having a difficult time getting going because it's got to get a temperature down below minus 0.5 degrees Celsius to be considered a La Nina, plus the atmosphere has to respond. And it tried it back in May, it tried it again at the beginning of August, and it just can't get below there. And I'm anticipating this staying above that negative 0.5 degrees Celsius mark, which means our La Nina, which is still forecast to develop this fall, is going to take a back seat to what the MJO is doing in the near term. Now, what are some of the other consequences of this? Well, we're going to lose momentum in the tropics once again, so that'll start to show up here on the edge of this diagram. And as the atmospheric angular momentum begins to tank in the tropics, it's going to leave the pattern in the position of what you see over there on the right. And that is a standing wave over Africa. In other words, everywhere I just kind of encapsulated here with these two drawings means that the upper levels of the atmosphere are going to be conducive to letting air exhaust upward. In other words, we get good rising motion. It's suppressed here. Now, why is this important? It's important because we are approaching the peak in tropical cyclone activity. We're right about here, and we're going in that direction. So over the next few weeks, we're heading toward the peak of the hurricane season. And while that is happening, we have the MJO favoring tropical development. Okay, putting it all together, we right now have, over the next 5 days, 2 tropical systems in the Pacific to watch, Fausto and Genevieve. But this morning, the National Hurricane Center gave a 50 to 60% chance that these 2 systems will intensify over the next 5 days. And there's a whole lot more tropical thunderstorm activity coming off of Africa. In its way is not dry and dusty air. Looking by the end of this week, the map over there on the left, well, wherever you see those warmer colors represent above average precipitable water in the atmosphere. So if we were going to be seeing these hurricanes or these tropical systems that are going to develop, really struggle to develop, you would see the image on the left showing up with a lot of blue in what's called the main development region, which is right in between these 2 lines. What about that dusty air? Take a look over there on the right. It's not nearly as dusty as it has been earlier this summer. So these systems aren't going to be working against extreme dryness and extremely dusty air. But here's the real problem. By the time we get to the end of this weekend, the end of this week, we are seeing our high pressure cell that normally sits out in the open Atlantic moving toward the East Coast. Okay, you can see it broadly sitting in here. The flow around these high pressure cells is clockwise. And therefore, anything that comes off of Africa or develops in the main development region or comes into the Caribbean is pulled right like this. And what that means is with the westward progression of that high pressure cell, there are better chances, should something develop in the tropics, that it's going to hit the United States. And that's got me very concerned because the latest update from the European model, which tracks where these tropical cyclone low pressure centers might form, is looking extremely hairy here. Can you see it? With the high pressure cell sitting there, you can see how active this particular corridor is forecast to be. So we're going to have to watch to see if any of these throughout this week become more organized, develop low pressure centers, and begin to spin more rapidly. Because if they do, the steering currents are such that this could put the Gulf Coast and the East Coast in greater danger of having a tropical system make landfall. So there's a lot of reasons to be watching this carefully. I also want to point your attention to one other thing. After last week's video was released, we watched all morning long the development of that large squall line, that derecho that went through parts of Iowa. Just want to give you an update from over the weekend. They've now raised the estimate of total crop damage. This is primarily corn and soybeans, to potentially up to 14 million acres. So there was 14 million acres in the path of those 57 counties that were hit pretty hard. Current estimates are somewhere between 6 and 8 million acres that were damaged. It could be much higher than that, though. The governor of Iowa has requested a federal declaration of disaster and is also asking for $4 billion in relief funds to help clean up after the mess that is going on here. And what we're going to be watching very carefully in the coming days and weeks, this is a satellite view from Saturday. And it's hard to see here, but you see the faint discoloration inside this area? That is the acreage that we're concerned about having extensive damage and possibly massive crop loss in this area. It does extend a bit into Illinois, but it's a bit more sporadic in where the damage was had. But I'll be honest, I've got to go back to 2011 before I saw a derecho event that was quite to this magnitude. So certainly something here that we're going to have to watch carefully. All right. From there, over the weekend, this is how much rain we got. Extremely wet in parts of North Carolina at the beginning of the weekend. You can see here some rainfall totals between 2 and 4 inches out of the past few thunderstorm complexes that have gone through. Over the next 3 days here, we can see that while North Carolina will see normal thunderstorm activity, the severe weather threat is really not there. So some locally heavy rainfall is possible, but no good conditions here for strong, severe straight line winds, hail, or tornadoes. The heat stays west. All of this over here to the left of the line I just drew is representing heat advisories. This is extreme heat watches and warnings and red flag warnings as well. So what are we expecting? Well, I'm just going to play this forward for you just to show you the scattered nature of the storms coming through on the next couple of fronts that are going to try to pass through North Carolina. It's going to be a lot of hit or miss storms to start the week before things get a bit more organized at the end of the week, increasing the chances of the shower and thunderstorm activity. So this whole business you've been in now for the last couple of weeks is not shutting down at all. So taking a look here at 3 different ways at the total accumulated precip. This is from the National Weather Service. We generally see across the state anywhere between a ½ inch to 1.5 inches of a precipitation. What about the European model? It's generally got 1 to 1.5 inches across the state of North Carolina for the next week. And the wettest of them all is the GFS. The GFS at times is putting across parts of the state 1 inch to up to 2 inches of rainfall. And what's going on here is with that high pressure cell kind of moving off, just off the coast, nothing is impeding the moisture flow from the Atlantic or from the Gulf. And we have these weak frontal boundaries stalling out here. And the other issue is high pressure is trying to build here, which is going to leave a boundary sitting between that high pressure over the Great Lakes and the other one that's sitting here. So the flow is coming around just like this. And North Carolina, while much of the southeast is just caught in the crosshairs. Let me show you what I mean. I can just play this forward for you so you can see exactly those processes taking shape. Do you notice how almost every day there's a big flash of green? What I also want you to see is that I went ahead and let this run out 10 days. This is all the way out to the evening of the 26th, and clearly we all see the system that the European model is trying to pull into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, of course, we don't know if that is going to materialize, but it does show you that the models are also picking up on the increased activity coming out of the tropics. So if we play this again, do it a little bit slower, we see that this afternoon and this evening, widely scattered showers. That's what we just got. This afternoon and this evening, widely scattered showers on the weak front that comes through. Same thing into Wednesday, although we've got a better chance, Tuesday, better chance at being drier here. But then as the week progresses, this is now Wednesday afternoon and evening, much better coverage of showers on Wednesday evening. You can now see one high pressure cell sitting here, the other one just off the coast. And that's the way things are going to be through Wednesday evening. Now getting into Thursday afternoon and evening. See the same thing here, more scattered storms. This is now working into Friday afternoon and evening. As we go into the weekend, this is Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and evening. Again, every day, a 30 to 60% chance of storms, depending on your location here. It is going to just continue to be able to put down very heavy rainfall amounts under those storms. This is Sunday afternoon and evening, and it's at that time that we might possibly get a little bit of a break early next week before we are watching the tropics very, very closely. So what's the atmosphere doing in the upper levels? Well, take a look at this. We have trough, ridge, trough, huge ridge, deep trough. That's a highly amplified pattern that we're going to be dealing with today. We've seen that. What about going out 1 week from now? We still see some similarities. In other words, that ridge seems to be immovable. Now, what this means here along the East Coast is that our chances of building in very high temperatures is limited. That heat will have to stay to the west. And even if I go all the way out to day 10, I can still see a broader ridge here, but the models are really trying to flatten the flow at that time period. And I'm just going to have to call them into question to say that at this particular point, I don't know that they've got this pattern very well nailed down. And the reason why? There's huge spread in the ensemble members. We're trying to return to a July pattern in the MJO, and the atmospheric angular momentum is tanking off. So I'm wondering if they're evolving this particular pattern too quickly, bringing another trough back into this area and just nearly zonal flow across the United States. I don't think that's the case. I think actually the GFS has a better handle on the more highly amplified pattern, and we're going to take a look at what that means in terms of temperatures in just a few moments. But should you start to see things return to what they were in July, like I talked about the MJO trying to do that, what this will mean is big high pressure cell sitting over the Arctic, deep low pressure sitting here over Scandinavia. What do we have? Systems coming out of Alaska, cutting through the United States, and at times ridges building from the southwest to the Great Lakes states. And that's what could be bringing back on quite a bit of heat as we get in, well, finish this month and get into the month of September. That's something I'll be watching carefully. So before we talk about those long-range temperatures, though, I would like to at least show you the GFS on the left and the European on the right precipitation patterns for week 2. Neither model is going to have this right. And the reason why is because of the increased tropical activity, 1, and 2, there's so much spread in the ensemble members that they flatten the pattern out and you lose any sort of detail. What I would tell you in the Carolinas is there's nothing at this point that's going to shut things down. What would shut it down? A giant ridge sitting right here, like over Nashville. If that was the case, the flow would come around like that. We would get super hot and dry. And you saw where I put that high. It was off the coast. And because of that, I don't anticipate anything in terms of high pressure cells shutting down our precip patterns. Let's take a look at what temperatures are going to do. Today's going to be a cooler one. We can see here with that frontal boundary passing and the chances for showers. We're talking about some mid-80s. Meanwhile, out west, just absolutely scorched. Like taking a look at the temperatures on Tuesday. Again, a lot of mid to upper 80s across North Carolina. Wednesday's another cool one. Thursday, same thing. As we get into Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, it's there where we start to return back over to our normal temperatures. But again, the question becomes, how well established is that ridge out west? Because in the 6 to 10 day forecast time period, we see that it's still there. See it in the heat? And therefore, over here in North Carolina, we're expecting our temperatures to be much closer to average and avoid that heat. And maybe that lasts all the way through the end of this month. This is taking us all the way back to September the 1st, and the models want to keep the higher heat west. But remember, they've got the flow pattern too flat, in my opinion, given what's going on with the huge spread in the ensembles. That is a critical piece to this. So one last thing I want to touch on here. This is the latest update for week 3 and week 4. So this is August 31st through September 6th on the top, and on the bottom it's the 7th through the 13th. I want to key in on the fact that the models in through this corridor are keeping things very wet. You can see it in both setups here for these 2 weeks. That would tell me that the issues with the tropical season becoming active are very real. They're showing up a lot in the models. We notice that as we finish the month of August, maybe our temperatures don't deviate too far from normal. That's the image in the upper right. But as we begin the month of September, maybe going back over to a warmer pattern across much of North America. That would follow a long-term trend over the last decade of having warm Septembers across the United States. But like I said, the biggest wild card is the tropics. Let's watch it very carefully as we progress through this month. I look forward to talking again next week. Until then, have a good one, and we'll talk to you next Monday. Thanks.